Good morning. I am really excited. I hear this is a very lively crowd. Makes my job much easier. Somebody laughed. Okay, I got one. Great, thanks. I'm really excited today to talk about the fickle consumer. It was a topic I was really passionate about. I know I was introduced, but just to give a little introduction of how I got into this background of location intelligence. I went to school for marketing, as I'm sure most of you did, and you learn about these basic things: product, people, place, positioning of things. The last presentation was great. But in that, I noticed that when working with a lot of companies, and early in my career I did a lot of consulting, both for for-profits and nonprofits, I noticed a lot of the same things. You would do a campaign based on your first-party data, and even some third-party data, and what worked before, all of a sudden, didn't work anymore. And you had to sit there and scratch your head and go, I don't understand what happened. What is going on with the consumer? What changed? And a lot of times when looking at data, you could scratch in deep as much as you could and even have some of the best analytics, and at the same time, there's always a missing piece. And this is where location comes in. One of the very first introductions I had to this, I was working with a nonprofit down in LA. And they had been around for 50-some years. They were seen as one of the leading nonprofits. Everybody saw them as a pillar in the community. They really understood everything that was happening. A movie was even made about them. These were the experts. And yet they found themselves within about a 1 to 2 year time period where all of a sudden people weren't coming anymore. And because of that, a lot of their investors were starting to pull out. And they said, oh my gosh, we've been around for 50 plus years. Are we going to have to close the doors? Unlike for-profits, nonprofits run on a 1 year track. And so myself and a few others, we came in to do some consulting. We put together a phenomenal marketing plan based on their knowledge of the community as well as what the investors were looking for. We launched it. Everybody was happy with it. But with most marketing things, you do the analytics kind of through the process, but it's really at the end. We looked at it and we said, there wasn't really a significant lift. This isn't really enough to help them be sustainable for long term. They might get through this year, but what about next year? And it was at this time I was introduced to something called GIS. I won't bore you with it, with what that means, but what it is it's location plus data and the science behind it. And once I was introduced to this science allows for you to take all your data points, any number of data points, and it uses location as the thread to connect everything, but more importantly, allows you to see it visually on a map and understand how different factors, even some things you would have never thought of, can actually impact what you're trying to work on. And it was in doing this that we noticed the community had totally changed, and nobody had noticed it, and it wasn't noticeable unless you could see the data forecasting trends on a map. It was crazy. It was like, I don't know if you've ever seen The Matrix. Maybe I'm dating myself a little bit. I felt like Neo. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm plugged in. Like, how could I be a marketer and not have this? This is powerful. And so I want to raise the question, is the consumer truly fickle? Or is it really our access to data and how we're viewing it? And I would say that's really what it is. When you can see your data in a new way and in real time, much like the previous presentation, when you can be agile and move with it as you see trends changing, it allows you to be much better as a marketer and also connect with your audience. And a lot of times, it gives us insight that our consumer isn't really fickle. There's been a change that we just haven't seen yet. The example that I want to share today, and we have a very limited amount of time, so if you'd like to talk about this more, we can. But I just wanted to share with you a quick story of how one of our clients got started. They're a national retailer. They have stores all across the US, and like most retailers in the past couple of years have said, oh my gosh, Amazon's out here. How do we compete? How do we raise our ROI? How do we grow our revenue? And they had a lot of analytics. They had their own first-party data. They had lots of third-party data. And they were doing all these things, and yet they still couldn't quite get the lift on their ROI and growth. Sound familiar, right? And so they said, what can we do? So we looked at their target market in San Francisco as a test audience because of diversity that was there. And we just started with the base question. What do you already know? What do you have based in your data? And so what the marketing team thought they knew, and here we go, Based on their first-party data in their CRM, as well as reports that they had purchased from various data companies, they thought that their primary market was Caucasian, living in suburbia, 40-somethings with kids, had a median income of $56,000, bachelor degreed, white-collar jobs, the soccer mom. Everybody's heard this. This was the persona that they were doing most of their advertisements to. And just to kind of give you an idea before we really start diving in, most data, when you look at it in your CRM or even in purchase data, it only goes down to the zip code level. And if you've gotten a report, it might not say it on the top, but you look right down on the bottom, it says zip code. And I say this for a reason, because zip codes are small in comparison to the whole US, and yet at the same time, if you look at the map, there's still a large area with a lot of households and a lot of neighborhoods. And I don't know about you, but where I live, a few blocks can mean a huge difference in the type of people that live there and what interests them. So the first thing that we did is we mapped their CRM, and this is something that you can do very quickly. We put their customers on a map, and we also put where their store locations were. Now, a bunch of dots isn't very helpful, so we just converted it to a heat map. This is like a 2-second quick change, live right there on the platform. And what we did is we looked at where most of the consumers were living. And so we looked at store 16, store 17 area, just for this test market to see what kinds of things we can implement. The first thing that we did is we connected it with what's called Tapestry. Tapestry is a database of personas, marketing personas, to try to understand what trends may be here. And I don't want to go too much into this, but I was asked, what can we do with this first-party data? You know, how can we enrich it with third-party data, especially with a lot of the concerns about the efficacy of data? And the only thing I want to say is Tapestry, unlike some of the other areas, what it has done is it has pulled away the private personal information and aggregated it so that way things are anonymous, there's privacy, but you still get really deep learnings. It was developed 34 years ago by data scientists. There's 50,000 data points, and there's 68 segmentations, and it's reevaluated every year. This year, there was a brand new segmentation that came out because the data showed that there's a new type of persona that came out. The next thing we did is we took a look at a previous campaign that they had ran. It was a 20% off coupon. They did 4 channels: email, online, a print coupon that somebody received at the point of sale, as well as an advertisement. And we went ahead and we mapped it. And this is where the cool stuff happens. So just to give you an idea, if we were to look at that campaign at the zip code level, which is most where you would see it in a CRM, it looks like email and online are really the only effective channels. And so previously, the marketing team had put much of their strategy here. But when we take a look at it at a block group level, because this is where we can do this real time in data, we notice that, yes, email and online are the most popular, and actually they have the greatest spend point per transaction when redeemed. There's also another trend happening here. Anybody see the outlier? There's a lot of money being spent on a print coupon. Where did that come from? So we took a look at that. Customers who responded to a print offer with a very high spend point, we're talking $9,000 to $10,000, we're in very, very specific Tapestry segmentations. One was senior styles, and the other is upscale avenues. Now, the thing to know about both of these, they're both older seniors. They usually are empty nesters, but there's a little bit of difference in motivation. One is really motivated by just enjoying their retirement. They may have a cell phone, but they prefer a landline. They might get digital advertisements, but they still prefer print. And it's no surprise that they wanted the print, and that's all they responded to. The second group, this is what I love about them, because I think this will be me when I'm older. They're serious shoppers. They love Nordstrom's, they love Marshall's. They like to find the good deals, high quality at a bargain price. So both of these groups responded really well to print. Just fast forwarding here, then we wanted to take a look at email. Who is responding to that? By taking a heat map or a concentration of where the email responders were, we learned that their particular persona is what we call the uptown individual. These are the laptops and lattes you might have heard about if you're familiar with Tapestry. These are the 30-something millennials. They're the highest educated in our nation, and they are very, very addicted to this thing. Matter of fact, they like to order groceries off of this, services off of this, and they love to be connected to brands via their phone. One of the things they did is they went ahead and they pulled information on this group and how they like to be motivated, how they like to be talked to. And then they went ahead and looked at some of the things that might be interest of purchasing. Since the soccer mom persona isn't really true here, what else maybe do we think was true but isn't? So we took a look and saw, is there leakage? There's a high demand for apparel in this area, and yet there wasn't enough supply. And ignore the gray, but the pink is where most of the demand is, and that's where this particular group is. Then we took a look at what overall, not just for this company, but in general, women's big ticket clothing purchases of $200 or more. It is a pretty demand in this area, but surprisingly, men's ticket items of $300 or more, greater demand. So we look at these side by side. This was another thing that the data surprised us in. They had thought women's apparel was the greatest thing in this area that people were looking for, but it was really men's big ticket items. So what were the learnings? So impact on ROI. The first thing that they did, we're not sending print advertisements to everybody anymore. We're only sending it to these particular segmentations within the CRM who live within a 25-minute travel distance to a store. And I said travel distance because store 16 is in a walking community where most people will walk to the store, and store 17 they'll drive. So we'll actually set it up so that people who live within that area, dependent upon how they travel and what their mode of transportation is, applies to them. This saved a lot of money and increased ROI. The next thing that we did is for those who are super connected on their phone and who have the brand's app right on their phone, we actually helped them set up through the platform where they could send out messages. This is how they like to be communicated. So anytime they were within a certain distance from a brick and mortar store or maybe some other point of interest, I don't want to say a competitor, but maybe, you could get an advertisement that says super sale, 20% off, shop now. And this is the way that folks like to be engaged with. So again, it raises the ROI and the revenue. Lastly, this particular group loves that white glove service. We know that because it's part of their tapestry, it's part of their motivation, and they also love brands. And so here we started a loyalty program based on this data that this company had seen. And this was starting a new tier of incentives based on spending, because we noticed by looking at the data, spends were usually really close, right? So maybe most of the spends were at $9,000. We wanted to bump them up to $10,000. And so by doing this with incentives, we can get them to spend more money. Lastly, because this particular group likes to shop together, one of the other things that they implemented is to then go ahead and say, hey, if you spend X amount of money annually, we're gonna offer you special things like private shopping experiences, maybe a fashion show. By the way, bring your friend. It's a guest offering. This is another way for new customer acquisition and to also raise ROI and revenue. Now, the cool thing about this is that once it's implemented, it was real time so that they could move with these different changes. And they could see the results right away by continuously bringing in their CRM information and their campaign information. And then this allows them to deploy it nationally after they do the testing. And I can't give away numbers, but I can say that most companies, including this one, after implementing this, within 3 years, see a 30% increase in revenue. Next, I want to invite out Grant from Regions Bank. And he's going to share a little bit about how this technology and this approach has helped them discover a new growth market. Grant, come on up.
Thanks, Rebecca. So like Rebecca mentioned, I'm Grant from Regions Bank, and I'm going to share with you a few minutes of a story about how we use Esri's location intelligence to help us discover this growth market. A growth market we've termed the emerging professional. So the idea of the emerging professional arose as we thought through that we wanted to capture the emerging professional early in their career and grow them as a banking customer, grow them into that wealth customer. But what's an emerging professional, right? As a bank, we used a pretty traditional definition of that emerging professional. For us, what that meant was someone who's probably just finished a professional degree, maybe just came out of college, Where we are from in Alabama, we're headquartered in Birmingham, in the Southeast, about 15 states. That traditionally in our mind meant doctors and lawyers and young professionals like that. So taking that definition, we started thinking through, well, who are these people? And as a bank, one of our tenets is that we take pride that we know our customer. And so we felt really good about that definition, and we took it, the definition of who that person is, some age range, income range. I won't give all that away. But we set that forward out to our associates, so the people who deal with the customers every day, and said, based on these parameters, how much of your day-to-day activity is spent servicing what we're calling the emerging professional? And the results came back, and they were a little surprising. Because by and large, what we were hearing is that the emerging professional really didn't impact our associates' day-to-day activity. But being a bank and being a data-rich environment, we've got really good first-party data, and we buy a lot of third-party data. So we dove into that and looked at our customer portfolio. So I know where these guys live. I know where they work. I know where they play. And what we noticed was that according to our income and age range type data, that we had a lot in our portfolio that met this criteria. So how did our associates' perception diverge so much from what we saw in the data as the reality? We started to sense really early on that we had a definition problem. So this definition of the emerging professional may not have been exactly right. Maybe, I think I'll call it a bit dated. So we took that data and dug a little bit deeper and started to see that in reality, what was happening was that we were seeing the rise of something new, the rise of the millennial. I know that's everybody's saying, right? We're all trying to capture the millennial and figure them out. But what we saw was that while we do have a lot of doctors and lawyers and people coming out of school with professional degrees, we're seeing the rise of the millennial artist, the millennial tradesman, the millennials push back into manufacturing and small business owning. These people met our criteria of age and income, but they didn't look like the professional we were expecting. So once we knew that, we, using Esri's technology and some of the data that's available, like Rebecca was mentioning, Tapestry, we were able to hone in on what turned out to be 3 key Tapestry segments that within the 3 segments encapsulated our entire view of what our emerging professional really was. They turned out to not be all doctors and lawyers. There were a good bit of nurses. That was interesting, a rise in nurses, but a lot of tradesmen, a lot of business owners. And then once we had the Tapestry segments, like Rebecca was mentioning earlier, we were able to take those and not just go with them just wholesale, like, hey, all laptops and lattes that's our core business everywhere. We understand that we are a brand, and there are markets I'm going to perform really well in. And there are some markets that we may be in that we're new or we don't have the market penetration, but we're able to take these and go into our priority markets where we know we have penetration and tease out where the other people that look like this live. And what that's allowed us to do is go into a market like Atlanta where we perform really well and tease out where are these emerging professionals. I can't give away too terribly much. It's still really early and it's sort of in flight, but so far the ROI looks really good. We're really pleased with how we've been able to capture where these people are, and like we just heard in the previous presenter's presentation, tailored the message to where they are. We know that these Tapestry segments prefer certain ways of getting that message, right? And so we're looking at ways of doing things like pushing that through our native app, doing things like pushing them deals when they're near our branch. And so far we've been really, really pleased. And we've really been pleased with how easy it is and how seamless it is to weave in Esri's location intelligence with our day-to-day workflows. So that being said, if you guys have questions, we're going to be back here at the Esri booth after this. If you guys would like to dig deeper into that or talk about some of the other things we've done, I'll be more than happy to do that. Thank you, guys.
And thank you, Grant, so much.
Absolutely.